Day 82 of the Atlantic hurricane season. It's day 100 in the Eastern Pacific. It's August the 21st, and we currently have a active in the Eastern Pacific, 94E, but more importantly we have two tropical storms in the Western Pacific at the moment. Tropical storm Trami, which is just shy of typhoon status as it moves through the southern Ryukyu Islands in Japan, and we also have tropical storm Pewa, which is currently heading towards the northwest near Wake Island at this time. We also have tropical depression 3C, which is just on the international dateline at the moment and is likely to be absorbed by Pewa over the next 24 hours or so. So this is the current situation in the Pacific. This is the only area where we have action at the moment, nothing in the Atlantic or the Indian Ocean at the moment. And you can see all four systems quite nicely there on that image there. Here's the Atlantic as well, not too much going on here at the moment. There is a bit of a tropical wave in the Eastern Caribbean, but nothing that's likely to develop. That was hinted to develop by the computer models a few days back, but it doesn't appear to have taken advantage of that. Nothing else on the way just yet, but one or two models predict a new system emerging from Africa very soon. The Indian Ocean remains quiet, as is normal for this time of year. You'll probably see activity flaring up in around October or November, maybe a bit earlier as well in the southern Indian Ocean, maybe. We'll see about that one. Looking at the current sea surface temperatures then, looking at the eastern half of the Pacific first of all, you can see warm waters extending across the central belt of that towards the equator, but very warm waters off the coast of Mexico, so any storm that forms there will certainly have a lot to take advantage of. Around the international dateline as well, waters there for those current storms are around 28 degrees, perhaps even more. In the Atlantic, the western half of the Gulf of Mexico remains the hottest point of the ocean, around 30 degrees here, and possibly further towards the east as well, near the Florida coastline. Warm waters here as well, around Cuba too. But in the central Atlantic, near the African coastline as well, still warm enough waters for development, 27 to 29 degrees generally across that region. In the Western Pacific then, you can see here a fairly mixed, but generally 26 degrees or above for quite a large area of the Western Pacific at the moment, virtually extending northwards almost as far as Japan, almost everywhere along the Western Pacific front. Certainly warm enough waters for tropical cyclone development, especially where these two storms are at the moment. Here's the first one, tropical storm Trami, currently at 70 miles per hour with a pressure of 978 millibars, positions 24.5 degrees north, 125.9 degrees east as of 9 PM UTC this evening, and is likely to become a typhoon as it moves towards the west-northwest, brushing or maybe even making landfall in northern Taiwan as a Category 1 typhoon, and then moving on to China, where it will make its second landfall, again probably as a Category 1 typhoon or a high-end tropical storm. So certainly some concern for this system, because it will probably be typhoon strength or indeed very close to that, but the rainfall as well will probably be fairly heavy, and indeed lots of warnings in Taiwan right now. Typhoon warnings in effect for the Miyako and Yayama Islands in Japan, the northern half of Taiwan, including the Lienchiang and the other islands, the Kinmen Islands. The gale advisories in effect for Okinawa, Daito and southern Amami Islands in Japan, and we also have heavy rain warnings over much of Taiwan right now, especially in the centre, those mountainous regions where we'll probably see some heavy rainfall, which could lead to landslides as well. A yellow typhoon warning in effect for southeastern China. That may be upgraded in time. That's the third highest in severity. And here we have tropical storm Pewa, which is just 173 degrees east, so that's near the international dateline still, and to the east of Wake Island right now. 50 miles per hour, pressure's 996 millibars, 18.3 degrees north, and is expected to move towards the northwest over the next few days as a tropical storm, and then probably slowly intensifying into a Category 1 typhoon. Don't forget, it's already reached that intensity once before. It'll probably do it for a second time, and maybe even peaking as a Category 2 storm as it stalls in the Western Pacific, but that will probably be short-lived, and then it will accelerate back towards the northwest shortly after that. But that's Pewa there. So let's take a look now at the current shear map then. First of all, the Atlantic, you can see quite low areas, low intensity shear in the central and eastern Atlantic, except for south of the Cape Verde Islands at the moment. So if that remains the same, any storm that finds itself in that region could have a good run at development. High shear along the Greater Antilles in particular, you can see there extending towards the northeast into the central area of the Atlantic. which would obviously inhibit storm development. Looking at the Eastern Pacific then, you can see, well, you can't see on this one, but 94E is just off map, just off to the east of the image there, in low shear conditions, so there could be some development occurring on that one. The models are certainly, some of them are in hinting at that, but you can see that central belt there around 10 to 15 degrees north. There's all sorts of low shear around that area in particular, so certainly good conditions there. The Western Pacific here, you can see how Pewa has been battling with high shear conditions just off to its northwest, and it's rising as well, so very high amounts of shear in this area, which could interfere with any future development, but we'll see about that, and we'll see if it decreases as well. Hopefully it will for that storm, insofar as the storm's concerned. But for Trami, certainly low shear conditions over that storm at the moment, which will mean some intensifying is probably likely. Looking at the Atlantic, you can see dry air along the central Atlantic there, but that moisture in the western half of the Atlantic is certainly notable here, especially around that wave, which is currently located just to the south of the Dominican Republic at this time. And the Eastern Pacific, you can see a big swathe of dry air around the central part of the Eastern Pacific. You can see 94E just to the south of the tip of the Baja California Peninsula, a lot of moisture around that system, no immediate threat of dry air for that storm, at least at this time, so we'll see how that one goes in terms of development. And in the Western Pacific, you can see lots of moisture here generally. Pewa there looking fairly misshapen, I suppose. Some dry areas are there towards its west, where those high shear levels are as well. But you can see in terms of Trami, all that moisture associated with that storm, all that rainfall associated with this storm extending as far south as the middle of the Philippines by the looks of things. So here's the Western Pacific overview then, the past 24 hours or so. It is a little bit dated, only about 3 or 4 hours, but it's not looking too bad. You can see how the storm's been developing, moving towards the north in the past 24 hours, and then moving towards the northwest, curving towards the northwest, and eventually will move towards the west-northwest over those southern Japanese islands, and then clipping the tip of Taiwan before making landfall in China. So this is Pewa. You can see how it's lost its shape in the past 24 hours in particular. That deep core of the storm with the heavy rainfall is still trying to go, but you can see how it's been fading over the past few hours, a bit of a waning process going on there perhaps. We'll see how this storm goes along, but certainly not looking too good for it in the immediate future. And this is Trami, which is indeed looking much better. You could perhaps see the beginnings of an eye perhaps forming in the centre of that storm there as it moves towards the Japanese islands, probably just passing to the very north of the Miyako island. You can see it there on the map overlay, just towards the north of the island. I believe it's moving right now. And let's take a look then at the models. The CMC model, first of all, has 2 systems, maybe even 3 actually, forming in the Eastern Pacific, 1 or 2 hurricanes, and another one at the end as a matter of fact. As for the Atlantic, I don't believe it forms any systems, at least not in the next few days. You can see 1 or 2 waves moving across the Atlantic, the central Atlantic. The ECMWF model predicts 94E to become a hurricane and graze the coast of the Baja California Peninsula, and another system forming after that, affecting the very same area, with another storm forming off to the west, and then stalling and then probably dissipating that same general vicinity. The GFS model is quite interesting. Apart from the storms in the Eastern Pacific, which both affect the Baja California Peninsula, we also have a tropical storm that forms in the Atlantic, possibly even off the African coast, and then passing to the south of the Cape Verde Islands and moving towards the west-northwest. So we'll see how that one goes. The NavGem model also has 94E developing into a hurricane, probably staying offshore of the Baja California Peninsula. As for the Atlantic, probably a weak tropical wave moving through the central Atlantic, but nothing much more than that. The GFDR model in the Western Pacific, you can see this, the Pewa, the current storm, not really taking any advantage of the current conditions, obviously it can't, and not going beyond tropical storm strength. The HWRF disagrees though, taking Pewa to a high-end Category 2 storm as it stalls in the Western Pacific in the next 5 days. So we'll see how that one goes about, and that's what the official forecast is certainly following at the moment. This is for Tropical Depression 3. We don't have these graphics for the Western Pacific, unfortunately, only the Eastern Pacific, which number 3 was just about in when this one came out. doesn't predict any development of that system. Indeed, it probably won't, because it's very close to Tropical Storm Pewa, and the bigger storm Pewa will probably absorb the storm, or indeed weaken it to an extent where it's completely irrelevant by the end of it, unfortunately for Tropical Depression 3. Looking at the shear comparisons, you can see how it goes off the charts very soon, according to GFDL and HWRF models, which will contribute to its demise. The GFS is a little more forgiving, staying around 20 knots, which is still a moderate amount. The sea surface temperatures are still remaining warm for this system, and indeed Pewa, so this could probably apply to Pewa as well, because it's in the same general vicinity, around 28 degrees generally over the next few days, and the relative humidity is likely to fall a little bit to around 50%, maybe even 40% if the HWRF is correct, and then it will probably be fairly unfavourable if it falls that low, if the tropical storm ventures into that region. The CMC model then for the Western Pacific then moves the current system Trami into the northern tip of Taiwan, and then into China, and another system forming behind that near the Philippines, in the Philippine Sea to the south of Guam, and then pushes it just past the eastern coast of Taiwan. The GFS takes Trami just to the south, meaning that it will make landfall in Taiwan according to the GFS model as a typhoon, and then moving into China as a slightly weaker storm, but still a high-end tropical storm, maybe even a typhoon for that as well. Pewa moves towards the southwest initially, and then moves back, accelerates towards the north, and then turns post-tropical eventually. Looking at the overall predicted season scores then for August the 21st, Williams in first place with 55 points, Woollyback 82 in second with 54, and BFDIA Submission 2 is in third place with 50 points at the moment. There are 193 entrants to date, and the average user score so far is 18.1. You can submit your own storm totals at the website force13.com/interactive.html. Just click the 2013 predicted season button and submit whichever totals you see fit for the Northern Hemisphere. So what happened on this day then, on August the 21st? In 1965, Tropical Storm Anna formed in the Northern Atlantic, there it is pictured. The next year, Tropical Storm Faith formed near the Cape Verde Islands. In 1976, Tropical Storm Dottie made landfall in South Carolina. In 1979, Tropical Storm Pewa formed in the Eastern Pacific, and in 1981, Tropical Storm Hillary formed in the Eastern Pacific, there it is pictured, at its peak intensity, a Category 1 hurricane that one turned out to be. In 1989, Tropical Storm Juliet formed in the Eastern Pacific, there it is pictured forming. In 1993, Tropical Storm Irwin formed in the Eastern Pacific as well. In 1998, Tropical Storm Charlie formed in the Eastern Gulf of Mexico. In 2000, Tropical Storm Typhoon Billis reached Category 5 intensity, there it is pictured just after that, and also that same year, Tropical Storm Kaimi made landfall in Vietnam, resulting in 14 fatalities. In 2001, Tropical Storm Chantal made landfall on the Yucatan Peninsula, pictured there, resulting in 2 fatalities and $4 million in damages. In 2002, Tropical Storm Fausto formed in the Eastern Pacific. The next year, Crovan made landfall in the Philippines as a Category 1 typhoon, pictured there before making landfall. And in 2006, Tropical Storm Debbie formed near the Cape Verde Islands, and Ileana formed in the Eastern Pacific on the very same day. In 2008, Tropical Storm Faye made its third landfall in eastern Florida. In 2010, Tropical Storm Frank formed near Mexico, resulting in 6 fatalities due to its close proximity to land when it formed. That same year, Danielle formed in the Atlantic, pictured just before. In 2011, Tropical Storm Harvey made landfall in Mexico, resulting in 3 fatalities, and also that same day, Tropical Storm Irene formed. There it is pictured in the Eastern Caribbean. And don't forget, you can track any storm that forms, or indeed any that are currently active. There are a few at the website force13.com/stormtracking.html, and there you're taken to the storm tracking page, where you can see the overview map with all the current storms, including invests, with the tables at the top and bottom which show their intensities and any warnings that are currently in effect as a result of the storm. And indeed there are at this time lots of warnings in effect for Eastern Asia, China, Taiwan, Japan at this time, and you can stay up to date on the website. They're usually more up to date than these videos, so you might want to check it out and remain up to date on the warning information as the storm moves ashore any areas that it may do so. It might make landfall in Taiwan, it might just brush it, but either way there will be tropical storm and maybe typhoon conditions reported in Taiwan in the next day or two. You can also visit the social pages, YouTube, Facebook and Twitter. Just search Force 13 on any of those and you should find us fairly easily enough. And please do show your support as always by doing the usual means of engagement, liking, following, subscribing, favouriting, or indeed anything else that may come to mind. And indeed if you want to comment on this video, please do so below this video, and indeed send any private messages. I'm very much open to private messaging if you want to have a question asked perhaps or anything else that may come to mind. You probably know better than me. Just send it through YouTube or anywhere else. And don't forget, it's 96 days until Hurricane Week 2013. This is our annual feature, the second time we're doing it this year. Just visit the website for more information, force13.com/HW2013. I believe we have at least 2 or 3 contributors at this time. Maybe you should be the 4th. If you have anything to contribute, then please do let us know, and visit that page as well, which will probably give you a bit more of an idea of what it will be about. You can also visit the discussion forum, which is online at force13.com/forum for discussion about current storms, or indeed past storms, or anything else that you may want to talk about. But until then, until the next bulletin, which will be at around midnight UTC on Wednesday morning, August the 21st, that's all for now.